Hello, David. This is going to be David here. This is going to be a very casual video. Um, Very casual. But I was listening to this woman on TED Talks. I found it very interesting how someone's taken an honest look at God. So I'm going to play a little bit, and then I'll comment. It's just interesting, kind of refreshing to see somebody actually investigate to see if this is real. And it's interesting some of the things she came up with. So, and I've been at this since I was 14 years old, so probably know more than most people. So we're going to play a little bit of this, and I'm going to make some comments about some of the stuff she's discovered, which maybe even Christians don't know. Some Christians maybe, who knows.
So, what are people doing when they're praying like this? They're using their imagination to do thoughts that you might have thought of as yours. Remarkable phenomenon that people not only What I want to talk about this morning is a remarkable phenomenon that people not only talk to God, but they learn to experience God as talking back. Many Americans are involved, and many other people are involved with what you might call a renewalist spirituality, a kind of spirituality in which they want to experience God intimately, personally, and interactively. They want to reach out and touch the divine here on earth. I wanted to find out how they did that. I'm an anthropologist. My job is to immerse myself in the world that I've come to study and to keep observing, so that to some degree I get a sense of what it would take to become a native in that world. Unlike Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, who are pictured here in New Guinea, I did this work in America.
I just want to check and see what an anthropologist is. I think it's just a person that studies mankind in the past. I mean, that's in my head, that's my definition. Let's see exactly what it is. What is an anthropologist? Anthropologist. I think that members of hunting and gathering tend to have more. That doesn't give me the definition. Ah. It's a study of what makes us human. Oh, that means you'd have to study the psychological, because that's mainly what makes us human, is how we think. So you'd have to be like psychiatrists. This ain't a very good definition so far. It's kind of a wide spectrum thing. It says here, it says, is a scientific study of humanity concerning with human behavior, human biology, cultures, and society, both the present and past. Well, I tell you what, I don't know what any anthropologist has ever learned, but she's talking about God in this video. God's already gave me all the information about how it all works. It all works by a thing called DNA. Whether it's mental DNA, spiritual DNA, or physical DNA. Mental DNA is the culture of societies. That means a belief system of societies of how things they believe. Spiritual DNA is either based on truth or lies, because Satan created the first lie. God is nothing but truth. Anything that comes from God is absolute truth. Satan, which is in the spiritual realm and also speaks to us like she's going to talk about in this video, everything he says is a lie. So words either life or death, they kill, still destroy. And in your DNA, either in your physical DNA, you have life or you have death. So that covers human biology. Human behavior is all a result of your mental / spiritual DNA. So that's all you really need to know. So I guess I'm an anthropologist. Because that deals with, it says they're concerned with human behavior. Human behavior is all done by what Solomon said, as a man thinks, which is a DNA in his heart, so is he. That's how everything works. And I'm a Christian, and God showed me that. Because he's the spirit of what? Of what? The spirit of truth. So that's what all of this is about. In a nutshell. Now, both the present and past, the past, just like the DNA of thinking of a past can emerge in the present. It's really the same type of thinking all the time. It's so simple in a sense. But anyway, that's all I want to say about that. That's what I see as anthropology. So anyway.
I spent 2 years in a renewalist church in Chicago and another 2 years in one in the Bay Area. I went to Sunday morning services. I was a member of a house group. I was in a prayer circle. I hung out with people. I prayed with people. I really wanted to know how their God became real to them. And so let me begin by asking, who is God in a church like this? Well, God is God. God is big. God is mighty and holy and beyond. But God is also a person among people. The pastors in this kind of church want you to experience God the way the early disciples experienced Jesus. They walked with Jesus, they ate with Jesus, they talked with Jesus. He was their friend. And these pastors will tell you that you should put out a cup of coffee for God. You should have a beer with God. Go for a walk with God. Hang out. Do the kind of thing with God that you get to do with anyone who you wanted to get to know as a.
I like that point she just said, because that's what I did yesterday. I went for a walk. Sometimes I stream on a website, and I can take people with me on a walk. Sometimes when you work my shift, you're too busy for a social life, so I'm gonna just stream on Twitch, and people can join me as I'm walking, and I can talk to them, and they can share my walk. They can see video of me walking, of where I'm at, and they get to enjoy being wherever I am, even though they're not there. But I didn't want to. I had some time yesterday, so I wanted to talk to God a little bit. So I spent a little time talking to him before I turned on my stream and talked to the people on Twitch. And God really rewarded me. The Bible says he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Ooh. So I need to remember that scripture right there, diligent. That's consistency. That means you just don't blow him off. You don't use him like a flat tire in for a car. I gotta make sure I give some time to talk to him before I go to work tonight. Because I got so busy in life, I got out of habit. But yesterday I took the time, and he really rewarded me. See, God knows everything, and he knows exactly how you think. Back 40 years ago, I had a revelation. Revelation was a dream / vision. And then I had 2 electric shocks come down through my body. And in this dream / revelation, it started out as a dream, and I woke up, and it was a vision. It wasn't just a dream, it was a vision from God. And he was showing me something. I was going down a road, and I don't have time to go too deep into all this. I'm kind of tired right now. But basically, everything was foggy, and then all of a sudden in this dream, everything became crystal clear, and it was like I was wide awake in the dream, even though I was still in the dream. I was wide awake. And when you get something from God, it's you can always know it's from God if it's more real than real life. Now, that's not always true, but it's true of a spiritual realm. Like people that take DMT, I've heard them say that. So they're in a real spiritual realm, even though it's not a God. It's not God, as far as I'm concerned, because you don't see God. You see these different things, and they seem to be consistently there. But it is a realm, a spiritual realm of some kind, and it doesn't seem to. I just don't believe it. You find God in that realm. I'm not saying you can't, but I think the demons are in that realm. I mean, if you're not born again, you're not going to enter into that realm. But I've heard people say that that's more real than real life, but I've also heard people that go to heaven say, well, that's way more real than real life. Like heaven has like 70 more shades of color. It's just so real compared to this. And it makes perfect sense because scientists see this world as like a hologram. There's so much space in between atoms that are, can you really even say you're here? There's so much space between you and what is an actual particle or thing. There's so much space. So of course heaven's more real because it's made out of pure energy, whereas this place is made out of kind of a broken down energy. That mostly has nothing but space in it. I mean, that's my theory on why it's more real. But what was she talking about? I just lost my train of thought. Let me see what she was talking about.
Here with God. Go for a walk with God. Hang out.
She's talking about going for a walk. Yesterday I went for the walk. And he's rewarded of those that diligently seek him. And yesterday he gave me a revelation, a mind revelation that's going to just change my life. And it has to do with this dream/vision I had. Everything became, my eyes became open. And I could see more clear than, I was in a fog, and then all of a sudden in this dream I woke up in the dream itself. Could see so clear. And then I wanted to control stuff. Or I was panicked once I woke up. And that's a phenomenon that's happening to me right now. The secret that God gave me. What it is it's waking up out of an ADD mindset. And that's so deep, I'm not even going to try to explain it. But an ADD mindset, you kind of live in your own world. You're in a matrix, is what I call it. So you kind of wake up. It's interesting how that fear and worry and all that stuff is like a spiritual matrix. But it is. And people can live in that all their life and not even know that there's another realm. And I don't think too many people understand or even know this stuff. But some people, I think, do. Some people escape that fear. I mean, even standing in front of a group of people and talking, you have to shift out of that. To be a comedian or people in Hollywood, they learn how to shift to that. And I read this one book called Please Love Me. There was like a knowing. The woman would always say there's like a knowing in Hollywood. A knowing. It was like a secret in Hollywood. These people knew something. But she could never figure out what it was. But I sense what it is. It's what I'm talking about as far as some people call it the power of now. But it's escaping the fear of your mind and living in the present moment and being brave enough to stay there. But you have to overcome fear to do that. And even people's made statements like, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself," because it's a spiritual place. It's a spiritual matrix. It's a spiritual thing that you enter into. And I could say I don't want to give any more secrets away than that, but I'm going to write some books about some of this stuff. But it's one of the most interesting phenomena in the world, and people can live in it their whole life, and they don't know how to escape it. But God gave me a secret as I was walking with Him yesterday on how to escape that. And it's not easy. People people go to therapy for ADD, and I doubt if it does any good, because I'm not sure if they really know what they're doing. But I've never went, so I don't know what they know and what they don't know. All I know is God is a healer, and He's always trying to fix stuff and always improve things. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about. That let's move on. Listen to what else she's got to say.
Do the kind of thing with God that you get to do with anyone who you wanted to get to know as a person. And He cares about all the stuff in your life. The little stuff, where you want to go on your summer vacation, what shirt you want to wear tomorrow morning. You can talk to Him about that. So I wanted to know how people learned to interact with God, how they felt that God was speaking back. And I knew that they learned, because newcomers would come to these churches and
what she's saying is just one revelation of God, as far as God caring, which He is a father. But that's just one manifestation, revelation of who God is. And yes, He is a caring person. I've had Him heal me of a headache and fatigue before, when there's people in the hospital that need, like, are dying of cancer or need a miracle. So, and then he helped me win a tennis tournament once. He spoke in an audible voice and told me to take one point at a time, and I won a tennis tournament. So, but God is also the person that created this massive universe where dark energy is racing at a rate and power that's just astronomically large and powerful, and he's not a man. So we kind of have to treat Him as such, because he's the most powerful, scary as in pure crazy power, a God, truly a God. I mean, just the Earth next to the sun makes the Earth look like nothing, right? And we're only talking about one sun, when each galaxy, and there's billions of galaxies. We live in a galaxy which is huge, but next to just our sun in our own little solar system, not even in the galaxy that we live in, which has what, I don't know, 300 billion stars. We're like a speck of nothing. And we have a God that made all this massive stuff, not only from the extreme large but the extreme small. So it's like we're so nothing compared to Him. So it's amazing that he would even talk to us on a friends type level. But He's not just that. He's also the other extreme. So, and He's also judge. He's not only God. He's judge. He's Spirit of truth. I mean, he's everything, everything. So anyway, I didn't even begin to cover what he is.
And they would say things like, God doesn't talk to me. And then 6 to 9 months later, they would say, I recognize God's voice the way I recognize my mom's voice on the phone. What I saw the church teach was that you should think about your mind not as a fortress full of your own self-generated thoughts and feelings and images, but you should think of your mind as a place where you are going to meet God. And that some of those thoughts that you might have thought of as yours, they were really God's thoughts being given to you, and your job was to figure out who is God.
What she's saying here works two different ways. Satan in there's no way she could know this, but Satan in Genesis, Jesus in the Bible, Satan cannot speak into Jesus' spirit. So when Satan manifests himself to Jesus, he had to physically manifest himself. You see that in temptation. He can't. There's no evil in Jesus' spirit, so he can't speak into Jesus' spirit, and Jesus think it's his own thoughts. But Satan changed our spirit in Genesis so he could have access. And it's like a permanent Trojan horse. So these thoughts within you, you have your own self. You have Satan that can speak in your spirit because he changed your spirit into his image so that he could speak into it in Genesis. Now he did that by what? Who is Jesus? Jesus is God's Word. What is God's Word? It's his DNA. What is DNA? DNA is something that speaks. That's why God is in the King James Version of the Bible 4,444 times. That's why DNA has 4 letters, because it's God pointing out the force. Then you have 4 as far as Jesus, the Word. Word is 4 letters. Even a cross has 4 points. Closest disciple Jesus, John, has 4 letters. Paul has 4 letters. John, the closest disciple of Jesus, wrote the 4th gospel. Then you have a seed, which God's Word is, 4 letters. Then you have, what other 4s do we have? There's so many of them. Jesus, who's the King. King has 4 letters. But the point of all of this, why God did all these different 4s, is the fact that his DNA, which is what he purified in Sarah's seed, and then was passed to Mary and then joined with God's seed, that's the Word. Word has 4 letters, which is a seed, which has 4 letters, which is DNA, which DNA speaks just like God spoke in Genesis and created stuff. So the Word, or the seed of God, entered into Mary. Her seed was purified from Sarah, from Abraham, whose seed maker the veil was taken off of, or not seed maker, but seed. They had circumcision. The veil was taken off. So Sarah's seed was purified, resurrected, purified, and then that was able to pass that to Mary. And everybody thought the Virgin Mary was holy, but no, it was Sarah's seed that was resurrected. That was how Jesus was able to join. At the appointed time, at the due season, he came. After he did everything he wanted to do from the 10 Commandments, which is once again is his word, or his seed, and his guidance, and his law, letting people know what happened and why they needed Jesus in the first place. So then, unfortunately, we still have a nature that can hear Satan's voice. That's why he did it. Because anything that speaks to you controls you. It's just like the media that's constantly speaking. It has the dominant voice in society, controlling the election. Anyone who can capture your ear, faith comes by hearing, but so does everything else. It's a portal of entry. You might as well say this is a USB port. Whoever can capture your ear, has your USB port, but your ear is in your heart. And that's what she's going to talk about here. How God speaks to you within. And your heart is your inner, where you listen innerly. Your eyes can see. You can, from this seeing, a person can produce a movie or a book. They can be like God and create an entire story about within a book. And then write it. It pops up on the movie screen as The Green Mile or this or that, or Shawshank Redemption. This is all from people inventing stuff within their heart. Just like God created everything He created, we can create. That's all from the heart. So this voice within, this inner consciousness, which is called the heart, is where you can hear God, but He can speak audibly. I've heard Him speak twice in an audible voice. And He usually does that when He wants to really point out something or to guide you in a specific way for your life. But He's already done that with the Bible. But then even though the word is like a seed that has to be opened up by the Spirit. The seed, without the seed being opened up, it's just like science is trying to open up everything and understand everything. They're trying to explain, they see that certain animals have certain characteristics and they try to look at their DNA or how they can survive cold or how plants can give this medicine or how the earth works, how atoms work, how everything works. It's all present and there, but it has to be opened up and looked at and understood, just like her job as an anthropologist. She's trying to understand. The word understanding is actually in the Bible more than faith and more than grace. So she's trying to understand. At least she's given an honest look at this stuff and coming to the truth. Where someone like Joe Rogan has never went down that rabbit hole. He's never took the time or energy to do that, and that's why he has such distorted views. But the more there's only a truth and there's only lie. Some people go down wrong paths and find lies. But as far as the way Satan changed our spirit in Genesis with his word and his seed, see, his word is a seed. And a seed transforms you into its image. That's what seeds do. The image of what I look like is all based on my DNA. People are always saying, well, you're in the image of God. But the image of God is not just physical. It's mental and spiritual. And Satan altered that mental/spiritual DNA and even altered the physical DNA. They didn't die. Once their mental DNA was changed and their mental/spiritual DNA was changed, their physical bodies started to die where they never died before. So something happened. And there's this physical, spiritual sickness. A lot of sickness comes from your thoughts because those are Satan kills, steals, and destroys with his DNA. And God's word, it can actually heal any sickness because it is what it is. But she doesn't know this, that Satan can speak into your spirit. Because in the book Conversation with God, this guy that was speaking, I could look at it and see this DNA in which he was hearing God, but he was also hearing Satan. And I thought, oh boy. But he was a brand new baby. He'd never ever heard from God before. And he didn't know which one to believe. Both were talking because Satan changed the image, our image. When Adam had a child, it was born in his image. It was no longer in God's image. It got changed. That's why Jesus said everyone's evil. So that image got changed, and the ability for Satan to be able to speak into our spirit and for us to hear that is really what propagates evil all over the earth. If we were good, if we were really in God's image, no one would do any evil. And no one would hear within their heart these voices, these different things, That's why people, when they, Son of Sam and these different people that really get deep into hearing satanic voice, of course Satan says, kill people, and they do. These crazy people like Son of Sam and these different people, they actually start hearing Satan. They're not necessarily crazy, but they are possessed with that DNA, and it's very dominant. Satan is about domination. He raped, in a sense, Adam and Eve. He's the ultimate child molester. Adam and Eve were pure children in God. He molested them, raped them, changed them with his DNA, his word. That was the first pedophile-ish rape. But anyway, I don't have time to get into too much of this stuff. So let's listen to a little bit more what she's got to say. I don't know how long I can't spend too much more time on here.
And in fact, people did talk in ways that suggested that they would have, as they had experiences that weren't their own. A woman said to me, as I've started to pray in this church, it feels like my mind is a screen that images are projected on. Somebody else.
See what she said? She said that her mind was a screen that images were projected on. See, your heart is the place where all images. Your heart is the image place where you can visualize going to the moon. And that's a DNA. That's a spiritual DNA. Your heart is what imagines laws that the president signs off with his authority in DNA, and it becomes a dominant thing in the land, hopefully. But it's all about a word. And I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, when you become one with someone, we're the bride of Christ and we're supposed to become one with God. As you start to become one with somebody, you hear their thoughts. You become one. Jesus talks about that in John chapter 14. He says, if you keep my commandments, then my Father will come and dwell with you. Now, if you keep Satan's commandments, well, his spirit will come and dwell with you. That's why we have to be careful. Jesus said, if the light that be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? If darkness is in you, you're in communion with darkness. And darkness is very dominant. That's why people, kill people, grab guns and kids, shoot up schools and do all these things because darkness is very dominant. The angels weren't able to resist it. Only 2/3 of the angels resisted, but 1/3 didn't, and these were angels. So when it comes to mankind, everybody succumbed to this darkness. Everyone. It was a clean sweep. Everyone died spiritually because they were contaminated with Satan's word, his seed. It was dominant. So everyone died. So that's why God so loved the world. That means all of his lost children, every human being alive, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. That we could get born again, but just because you get born again doesn't mean that old nature isn't ever present. The only time you lose that old nature is when you get baptized. Baptized represents death. So once you die, that old nature stays behind because that's actually what's dead. Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. That spiritual dead spirit, actually, when you die, there's a separation between you and it. It's a separation. And you can't be separated from it until you die. Just like a woman and a man, they were one flesh. Once the woman dies, then there's a separation. So once we die, then there's a separation from that spirit which Satan changed into his image. It's not totally in his image. If it was totally in his image, then we'd be totally if it was totally in his image, then all of us would just be totally evil. But it did change it in his image enough that he can speak into us, and that we can be confused on which one to yield to, and not know when darkness is in us. I mean, the scribes and Pharisees murdered Jesus. I mean, they didn't recognize him as God. He was like a different creature, and he was. Totally different. He would say, like, where's your faith at? Because he wasn't connected to any of that darkness. He was only connected to God. He was hearing, he saw whatever the Father was wanting him to do. He saw the Father doing it. He saw it in his mind. He could hear the Father. He was totally connected to the Father. And he even said the same about us. He said, you must abide in me. You can't do nothing if you don't abide in me. That means you can't do no miracle. You can't heal. You can't do this. You can't do that. So you have to learn to abide in him. One of the ways of learning to abide in him is learning to hear him. That's the beginning step. It's no different than you talking to your baby. Your baby has to differentiate who's talking to it. There can be many people in the room. Satan's definitely in the room, and he's talking. And he wants to talk louder. He's since he changed our spirit and image, you can't see him, but he is speaking through other people all the time, and sometimes that's the only voice you hear. Like last night, I had someone do something very evil to me, and for the last, I was able to at least get a decent night's sleep, but before I went to bed, and even after I woke up, all I could think about was this evil thing that this guy did. I couldn't let go of it. But God taught me how to function, even though something like that's present. I know how to function now, which before, if something like that happened to me, I couldn't even function. It just paralyzes me completely. But at least I'm at a point now where, even though it's present, speaking to me, trying to dominate my mind, heart, and focus, I was able to function pretty good today, considering somebody did something that evil. But something like that, you have to have faith that God will take care of that, because these are powerful spiritual things where Satan rises up through people and attacks you. It's the same as he tried to attack Jesus right before he was going to do his crucifixion. But Satan's always rising up, speaking through somebody, and that's what he does. And I gotta get used to that kind of crap. But right now, I'm just trying to be used to living in. Well, it's complicated. I can't get into it all. But that it's basically speaking to the heart. Now, God can easily speak to you in an audible voice, and the reason he doesn't, let me explain that real quick too, since I'm more of an expert on this stuff than this woman here. But she's got a good grasp better than most Christians, I think. And I'm not saying I know everything. But the other thing, what was I going to say? I mean, this was 5 years ago. Who knows where she's at now? She says, right here, she says, someone else has control the clicker. It's just your heart. That's where God speaks. And yes, he does present thoughts and images. And you know the difference. Now, I have a spiritual gift of understanding where if I use it, stuff just opens up to me, and that's a level of understanding that comes straight from God. That's where all this information that I've said has all come from. No one taught me anything I just said. No Christian taught me any of that stuff. But it's just a portal, an opening, a gift. It's a gift, which is a connection to God, where I have understanding in these things. Anyway, let's play some more.
is controlling that clicker. And of course, not all thoughts were thought to be good candidates for the kinds of things that God would say. People would look for thoughts that stood out, that were more spontaneous than others.
See, and what she's talking about right now is the heart. The heart is a place which you have your own consciousness. I like to call it a hard drive or a heart drive. Every memory, every experience, everything that you've ever encountered, your entire life is downloaded into that. And it's what creates your character and even how you respond to certain situations. Like a lot of people are triggered by Trump. Trump doesn't faze me at all. He doesn't trigger me in the least. He's just another guy to me. I guess I'm not insecure, or I don't feel threatened by him, but some people do. And those people have something in their heart that from downloaded, which speaks to them. And then there's also, so that's one thing that speaks to you. The other thing that speaks to you is, like I said, God or Satan. Now, if you're not a born-again Christian, well, it's pretty much your heart and Satan. And it doesn't have to be Satan. There's a lot of people that are not born again that don't listen to Satan. Just because you're not born again doesn't mean that you listen to or are dominated by Satan. Joe Rogan's an excellent example. He's mastered his heart. It doesn't dominate him. Now, Satan can only dominate what you let him dominate. He doesn't even have the power to dominate someone like Joe Rogan. Now, he's got to dominate it as far as not him believing in God, like this woman who actually went down the rabbit hole and investigated it and found out it was true. But Joe has never went down that rabbit hole because I think he's afraid of losing something. When it comes to God, you don't lose anything. You only gain. That's just a lie. He doesn't know God. Doesn't know how good God is. God is not a thief, only Satan is. Joe thinks, he'll have to give up being a comedian and saying like he likes some of the nasty things that Joey Diaz says. He just loves that because it's funny. And Joey's a real person. I like Joe. Really like Joe. Even though I don't approve of everything Joey says, at least he's honest and he's upfront and he's straight and he's real, which is more than some Christians. Like Christians can shake your hand at church, and they're pretending to be Christians is what they're doing. They're actors. They think that God wants them to shake your hand, so they shake your hand. They say, "Hello, brother," which is just all horse manure. Don't call me brother. You don't know me. Get to know me, and if you actually take me out to eat, get to know me, get to know how I think, well, then you can call me brother. Then if you, then maybe you can call me that. But I suppose I'm a brother in Christ in a sense, but I don't like fake. I don't like people playing games. I respect Joey Diaz because at least he's real, But anyway.
Thoughts that were louder, that captured your attention. One woman explaining to me how she learned to discern God speaking said that people were praying over her one day, and the phrase, "Go to Kansas," flashed into her mind. So her parents live in Kansas. She was kind of idly thinking about visiting them. But when this thought just captured her attention, it made her say, makes me want to say, where did that come from? So you could imagine that there would be risks from this style of discerning God's voice. I did think that people were reasonably thoughtful about the process. I also thought that the church took care to minimize those risks. One morning the pastor said in church, if you think God is telling you to relax and calm down, totally fine. Take it as God. If you think that God is telling you to quit your job, pack your bags, and move to Los Angeles, I want you to be praying with every member of your house group. I want you to be praying with your prayer circle. I want you to be praying with me so that together this community can help you to discern whether that's actually God or just some of your own stuff that's getting in the way of your relationship. So, what are people doing when they're praying like this? They're using their imagination to do something that they do not regard as imaginary. If you are going to represent God, if you're going to think about God, you've got to use your imagination because God is invisible.
First of all, God's not he's invisible because we're spiritually not discerning him. He's actually not invisible. It depends. And you don't use your imagination because it's not. Your imagination is your heart where you can imagine things, but when you get the truth in your heart, that's not imagination, that's reality. See, when Peter in the Bible believed that Jesus was the Son of God, he didn't do it by his imagination. He did it by a thing called revelation. He walked with Jesus. He saw the things that Jesus did. He saw Jesus stop the winds and the waves. He saw Jesus walk on water. He saw all this stuff, and that's not imagination. That's him saying, well, there's something special about this person. But even seeing all that wasn't enough. God had to literally tell him in his heart that this is the Son of God. And that is not his imagination. That's actually God speaking to his heart, a thing called, it says in the Bible, you'll be led into truth by the Spirit of truth. And truth actually is a spirit. It's God's Spirit. That's why Jesus is the truth and the way and all that stuff. That's an actual truth. And faith is not based on imagination. Real faith is based on God doing something to actually prove to you that he's real. Now, I'll tell you my first story at age 14 just to show you the beginnings of him giving me faith that he's real. That's how it works. Now, exploring this a little, now she's only very young into this. I had my first encounter at 14 and I'm 62 years old, and I haven't even pursued God that much. There's a reason for that. I plan on doing a big pursuit here. As soon as I quit this job I'm at, I'm going to be doing a big pursuit like never before, and I'm going to find God in a way that maybe few men ever find him. That's what's going to happen. It is going to happen. But anyway, I'll tell you about my first encounter. Then I'm going to end this, because that's all the time I got. I've actually used more time than I was going to. She just caught my attention by some of the things she was saying. I felt I just need to explain it more because I've been involved in it more than her, even though she's bringing up excellent points for someone who's so new into it. My first encounter, faith is an imagination. Faith is something God really does to prove to you absolutely that he's real. So I'm gonna share the story, then I got to get off here. My first encounter was let's talk about one encounter. I've had hundreds of encounters, hundreds of manifestations, hundreds of different things, but I'm just going to talk about my very first encounter. And that's what gives you faith. Not your imagination. It's not your imagination. It's reality. Faith is a substance. That means it's a real thing. So let me talk about my first encounter when God helped form my faith. which is faith is not. Faith isn't a fact. Faith is not fiction or imagination. So to actually prove to me that he's real, and it's no big deal. It's not a big deal knowing he's real. It doesn't make you righteous. Demons know that God's real. Demons know all this stuff. Demons knew when Jesus walked up in the Bible. They knew that was Jesus. The people didn't know he was the Son of God, but they knew it. So just because you know that doesn't make you good or in any way. So just because I know this stuff, don't think that I'm good. It doesn't have anything to do with righteousness or goodness. Goodness is knowing the truth and following it and doing it. But I don't want to get into all that. Let me just talk about this first encounter. The first encounter is I was about 14, 15 years old, went to a basketball practice. A minister wanted to, I guess he wanted to try to get me saved. Kind of did it in a sneaky way. He had both me and my friend take a test after basketball practice. He used that as the bait to lure us there. And I don't really like the way this guy did this, even though he did me a favor. I think it was kind of sneaky. But it was his way of trying to help people become Christians, and it worked. But I don't really appreciate it in a sense, because I feel like it was entrapment in a way. I couldn't even tell you this minister's name. I could tell you where the church was at, but not his name. So we had him just take this test, and my friend said he'd go to, if he died, if he thought you'd go to heaven or hell. My friend said he'd go to heaven, so he didn't talk with him anymore. He just let him go. Me, I was honest. I felt that there was something about me that wasn't perfect in God's eyes, and that somehow I wouldn't go. So I was more purely honest and I've always been a very honest person, maybe too direct and too honest with people, and they get mad at me. But that's probably one of my faults and one of my strengths. So I was very honest, and I said, no, I don't think so. So then he prayed with me and said, look, you can't get to God other than through this guy named Jesus. And I had no clue who Jesus was, nor did I really care. So he did his prayer, and I felt it was very embarrassing. And I prayed with him because somehow there was a spiritual mindset about God that it was shameful. I don't know how Satan permeated that spirit in my generation, because now I don't feel that way at all. Not even in the smallest about. I mean, what's there to be ashamed of? The only thing to be ashamed of is if you're involved in satanic stuff, sin and all that crap. That's shameful. But somehow Satan had turned it around. I don't know how he did that, but so I was kind of embarrassed about the whole thing, and prayed with him, and he said, you can't get to God other than through this guy named Jesus. So I didn't know who Jesus was, didn't really care. Did the prayer, got the hell out of there, never went back. And somehow God showed up about a month or two later. And I tell you, this presence that showed up, whew, I'd like to get that back. I mean, I can kind of feel God's presence right now as I'm talking. It's like a 4 out of 100 when that was 100, or maybe, I don't know, maybe 4. Yeah, about 4 or 5 out of 100. I barely feel his presence compared to that. That was like a pure presence. But boy, it came upon me, and I tell you, it was the best thing ever. It was, I just wasn't alone anymore. I always felt lonely. And that's what, so I wasn't alone anymore. And I didn't know it. I never read the Bible. I didn't know the Bible, the Holy Spirit was called the Comforter. I didn't know that. But I didn't feel alone anymore, and I thought, wow, there's a presence with me, and you instantly know it's God. I mean, you just know it's God. Don't ask me how, you just do. So it was with me, and it was very comforting, and it was like, when it was with me, it was like almost magical in the fact, it was like a realm of blessing, an atmosphere of realm of blessing and goodness and peace and special, just special, like you're special. Everything, you're a special person all of a sudden. It's hard to describe all the different feelings and emotions. Joy, almost like the excitement you have Christmas morning, all of that was present. It's almost like like some kids have their father right there helping them in their life. Right there, it was like that, except if you couldn't see him, like she said, you can't. I wasn't able to see him at that time. I guess I gotta get into that. Talk about how you see God, because you can. But for the most part, you sense it by feel. So it was a powerful presence, and I was like, man, if I ever lose this, I thought there's gonna be. If I ever lose this, I gotta try to remember and never lose this, because this is too good. I don't ever want to lose this. So anyway, well, that's when Satan came into the picture, and I didn't know that Satan could speak into your spirit. I thought it was my own self. So after about 3 or 4 weeks of God, all of a sudden Satan showed up, or a demonic spirit. Who knows who it was? Obviously an opposing spirit of a demonic of type. And it just kept saying to me, the mind is a powerful thing. I was just making all this up in my mind. And I was a very, very intelligent kid. And I thought, that's an awful good point. Maybe I'm making all this up in my mind. But it put a doubt there, and that's what Satan does. And finally, after it wouldn't even let me sleep at night. I never ever had trouble sleeping, but it was a presence that would argue with me as I'm trying to sleep, and I thought it was me. I didn't know another spirit could speak into your spirit and be so dominant, but it did not want me to believe in God. It was an opposing demonic spirit. So, and it would wrestle with you, just like the Bible says. We wrestle not with flesh and blood. It wrestled with me, and I couldn't even sleep at night because it would just wrestle with me. And I thought I was just divided in my own self. I didn't know it was a spirit, and it was. So finally, I gave up. It won the wrestling match, and finally I just said, something, maybe I am just making all this up in my mind. So no sooner than I agreed with this spirit that had wrestled with me for a week or two, all of a sudden God saw that I didn't believe anymore, and he showed up. And I mean, it was almost instantly. And when God showed up, and he spoke to me in telepathy, which if you read about a near-death experience, you can go through the near-death experience of a blind girl that was born blind that never saw, ever. Even when she dreamed about feel and stuff like that. She never saw, even in her dreams. Who, when she had a near-death experience, she saw for the first time and saw her own body, saw all kinds of things. She had 2 different near-death experiences. A blind from birth, saw for the first time when she left her body on a near-death experience. So anyway, she was talking about how people could talk to each other in telepathy, and yes, they do in the spirit world. It's very easy. She could even understand the thoughts of other people and how they felt about her when they were working on her half-dead body, she could, being strictly in the spirit, she could hear their thoughts and know what they felt on the inside. So in the spirit realm, when God showed up after I believed that he wasn't real, then let's make sure I'm still my mic's still on. Yes, it is. So when he finally showed up, and it was very, very clear telepathy, and he spoke, and he said, I could hear it clear as a bell, even though there was not an audible voice. I could hear it clear as a bell, and he said, if you let me, I'll prove to you I'm real. And you knew when you heard his voice that he was, you just knew that he was as serious and as sure what he said he would do whatever he would say. You just knew how serious and he wasn't serious. It just, I'm trying to put the exact, you just knew without a doubt that what he said he would do. That there was no joking, no doubt in what he said. So he said, if you let me, and he wasn't going to force it on me. He said, if you let me, I'll show you that I'm real. See, he's not a jerk like Satan. Satan is just very dominant. He wouldn't do it unless I let him. He wasn't going to prove to me is real. So finally, I had to make a decision, and I knew something would happen. The only thing I knew about God was I saw the Ten Commandments, the movie with Charlton Heston as a kid. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. I'd kind of seen that, and I thought, well, I don't know what he's going to do here, but I had to know. It was his presence were so good. It was such a blessing. It was so comforting. It was so special. He blessed everything around me, just like the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible. Wherever it went, everything was blessed. It was so fantastic that I had to know that he was real. So I said, I finally got up enough courage, and I said, yes, show me. So when I said that, I guess in God's presence, we're not allowed to be on our face. So my body just went limp. I had no control. I was one of the most athletic kids, the fastest athletic kid you could possibly know. I mean, just supreme athlete. But I had no choice in the matter. My body just, it's like somebody shot me with paralyzing agent, and I just fell off the bed and fell straight on my face on the ground, straight with my face toward the ground. Now, how in the world he did that, I don't know. But I'm down on the ground. He just paralyzed me, and I fell on my face. But I guess you're not allowed. That's just, I hear that time and time again, with people that encounter angels or God. They just fall out. They can't stand. They just fall out on their face. But I've seen that since then, hundreds of times, but I've never, that was a true encounter. And so I fell. I had no choice but to fall out on my face on the floor. So then I'm laying like this, straight down on my face, and all of a sudden to my right, behind me, I feel this presence. I mean, you could, it was powerful. You could feel it. And I knew there was something in the room at me, and I knew it was there. Don't ask me how, but you could feel it very strong, very, very strong. So then I thought, well, I'm going to look at it. So I start to turn my head up, and as I'm about ready to look back to look at God, it said, you're not allowed to look at me. Now, it wasn't until many years later I read the Bible and I found out that Moses was not allowed to look at God. And I didn't know I wasn't allowed to look. I didn't know until he said something. See how that agrees with the Bible. Just like it agrees with the Bible, the Comforter. I never read the Bible, didn't know anything about the Bible, didn't know who Jesus was. Never went to a church that ever talked about anything like that. Didn't know anything about anything. But I experienced the Comforter. Everything that Jesus talks about as far as what the Comforter's like. The peace and joy and all the presence you feel. He said that to the disciples, and I experienced all of that. I experienced it first before I read it in the Bible. Then I experienced falling out. Like you see all these Christians on TV, men of God lay their hands on them, they fall out. I experienced that. No, there was no televangelist there. It was just me in my bedroom. Me and God and Satan had convinced me that that God wasn't real, or a demon, or whatever it was. I was the only people present. There was no evangelist laying hands on me, so I fell out. So then I was going to look back and look at him, and he said, no. He said, you're not allowed to look at me, which is consistent with the Bible. So that was just one encounter that I've had, and that's what faith is. It's not your imagination, like she's saying here. It's not your imagination. It's reality. That presence was reality. That presence was a powerful love, a peace, a joy. That's not imagination. That's a presence. And it was the most fantastic atmosphere, just like the atmosphere of heaven. It was an atmosphere that's with you that changes everything. So that was my first encounter with God, and that is a real event. It's not imagination, and I don't know where she's going with all this. I'm just saying, faith is not imagination. And that's the kind of stuff God does. He proves to you that He's real. Now the more revelation you get, the more you're going to get judged. So He's careful with these faith revelations, because the more revelation you have, the more judgment you have when you sin. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, their revelation was greater than anything that had ever been, even in Jesus' day. Now, yes, it was great in Jesus' day in the fact that if you follow Jesus, you got to saw some tremendous stuff that goes beyond what they saw coming out of Egypt. But the whole group of people got to see this coming out of Egypt, not just 12. And how Judas could turn to Satan after seeing what he saw is pretty messed up. But he thought he knew Jesus was going to die. I guess he believed that part. He just didn't know what was going to happen after. He didn't know what the plan was. I mean, it takes all of us time to learn. I'm not saying any better than Judas or anyone else. But that revelation, once you have that revelation, you get judged. That's why when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and they continued to sin, and then they built the golden calf and then started having sex and all the stuff they did. God said, those that sinned, I'm going to blot out of my book. And the reason He said that was because they had revelation, like beginning like what an angel, knowing that God's real and knowing all about God. They got that revelation, and then judgment comes when you start getting adult revelation. Start seeing that God's real with all the stuff they saw. You can't keep sinning because angels didn't get forgiveness of sin. So that's why God doesn't show Himself real as far as sight. Now, if He really trusts you, He will do it. Now, if you look at Abraham, yes, he appeared immediately to him in an angelic form in which he could actually see Him. But you see Jacob, his first revelation after he stole the birthright, not being that good of a person, his first revelation was just dream. He dreamed, and in the place he was at, he saw angels ascending and descending in a dream. But as Jacob grew and started to get closer to God and rely more on God, then he wrestled with what a lot of people believe is Jesus. Now, who that was for sure, I don't know. But he wrestled with an angel. And the key word is wrestle. He wasn't like Father Abraham, who stood before him and spoke as a friend. He wrestled. He didn't trust him. He's really wrestling, in a sense, with his own evil. His own evil nature that stole the birthright and treated his brother like he did. And that's what we all wrestle with. Satan, I wrestled with my thoughts today after this guy at work last night did me dirty. But we have to learn to forgive and overcome things. But Jacob suffered needlessly because of his lack of his close relationship with God. His son was in Egypt, and he thought his son was dead. But if he would have listened to his son's dreams, just like he had dreams, he blew off his son's dreams. His son dreamed and said that he was going to be a great king, even over his father Jacob, and he was. But he didn't listen. If he would have seen that revelation was from God in his son's dreams, then he would have known his son was still okay. But he suffered all those years thinking his son was dead in depression and grief until finally he found out that Joseph was alive in Egypt. He suffered needlessly. And we all suffer needlessly because of our lack of faith and our pride. It was just pride. Him thinking that his son couldn't have revelation also. His son had the birthright, in a sense. Had the favor of God and the favor of his father. But anyway, I don't got time to talk anymore. But I've heard the audible voice of God twice, seen Jesus in a vision once, and I'm glad I ain't seen him no more than that, because that's a long story. Because I don't want to be judged. So it's good that I haven't seen any more than what I've seen, even though I've experienced a lot. But the other thing that people don't know about me is I lived in my heart. They call it attention deficit disorder. You actually live in your heart. And it's a spiritual domination of fear. You're living in fear and worry. I guess to explain it to people that don't understand, maybe look at this song here. That's the only thing I can tell you. I've explored this subject for 11 years straight. What's this song called? I mean, this is just one little revelation of people that kind of understand. Just look up the song Incubus and Drive. It's talking about living in fear and not living in fear, and having your eyes open. But this is a deep topic. This is a very interesting phenomena of us humans, which I don't want to share too many secrets about. But people can live in this. And I lived in domination of the mind for 40 years, and I'm not the only one. But it's a shame my dad lived in that fear all of his life and then died. Lived in that worry and fear of the heart, not freeing one's mind from it. And I don't claim to be totally free. I'm getting there, though. More powerful all the time. But just listen to this song here. It's amazing how God speaks through other. He'll speak one way or another. If Christians aren't teaching stuff, He'll find somebody to put understanding of some type out there. It was the wise men that knew Jesus was there before the Christians in the Bible. So God's always trying to find an outlet to speak. Even though a lot of Christians don't believe in such things, but that's okay. I'm not your typical Christian. So anyway, that's all I got for now. I'm out of here.